To thine own self be true. You've heard it a million times, right? It's everywhere, on coffee mugs, posters, you name it. It's become this huge modern mantra, a kind of rallying cry for living an authentic life. But have you ever stopped to think about where it actually came from?
For so many of us, this phrase is like the ultimate permission slip to just be yourself. It's this idea that you should follow your own path no matter what anybody else thinks.
Yeah, it's pretty much sold as the #1 rule for self-help and personal growth. The thinking goes, if you can just nail this one piece of advice, you'll unlock a life that's more real, more honest, and way more meaningful.
But what if I told you that the way almost everyone understands this quote is based on a huge and honestly a pretty fascinating misunderstanding? What if the original meaning was something totally different? Okay, so to really get what's going on here, we have to go back to the source. And the truth about where this quote comes from, well, it adds this brilliant layer of irony that changes absolutely everything. So, who do you picture saying these words? When you hear advice that sounds so deep and profound, you probably have a certain kind of person in mind. Maybe some wise old philosopher sharing a lifetime of wisdom, or, the noble hero in a great story standing up for what's right. Well, the reality is a lot funnier and a lot more complicated.
The advice actually comes from a character named Polonius in Shakespeare's Hamlet. And this guy is anything but a role model. He's a scheming, hypocritical courtier who spies on his own son and basically uses his daughter as a political pawn. He literally gets killed while he's hiding behind a curtain, eavesdropping. So get this, the most famous piece of advice on being authentic comes from a character who is fundamentally fake to everyone, especially himself. This whole irony perfectly sets the stage for a really deep conflict that, honestly, most of us deal with every single day, whether we realize it or not. It's this constant battle between two of our most basic human needs, the need for attachment and the need for authenticity.
So, Dr. Gabor Mate talks about attachment not just as a preference, but as a hardcore biological need. Think about it. When we're babies, we're completely helpless. Our survival literally depends on staying close to our caregivers. So this drive for connection, for attachment, is baked right into our DNA. It's non-negotiable. But at the same time, we have this other essential need, authenticity. This is our connection to ourselves. It's that ability to know what you're feeling in your gut and to actually be able to act on it. You can think of it as our internal compass.
And right here, this is where the trouble starts. Imagine a little kid. Let's say they get angry. If that child gets the message, even subtly, that their anger is a threat to their connection with their parent, their attachment, what are they going to do? Well, they can't risk losing that attachment. That feels like a survival threat. So they learn to push down their real feelings. They learn that it's safer to disconnect from their gut than to risk disconnecting from the people they depend on. And making that trade-off, choosing safety over authenticity, it doesn't come for free. Consistently pushing down our true selves has some pretty devastating consequences for both our minds and our bodies.
There's this tragic story about the incredible cellist Jacqueline Dupre. As a kid, she felt this immense pressure to perform, to please everyone with her talent. Dr. Mattei tells this story about how she once confided in her sister, saying she had this gut feeling that by always suppressing her own needs for others, one day she wouldn't be able to move. Decades later, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. It's like her body was keeping score all along. And what she went through is a perfect example of what researchers now call toxic stress. When we're living with that kind of long-term internal conflict, our body's stress response system just gets completely overloaded. And this isn't just a feeling, it's a real physiological process that can have major impacts on our long-term health. The researcher Brené Brown talks about the fallout from this, and it's a sobering list. When we live out of sync with who we really are, it can show up as anxiety, depression, addiction, burnout, rage, and a whole bunch of stress-related physical illnesses. The price we pay for hiding is incredibly high. So if hiding is so costly, how do we find our way back? Well, the path forward is all about making a conscious choice. It's a deliberate decision to start honoring our true selves again, to reclaim the authenticity we might have been taught to sacrifice a long time ago. And there's a really fascinating perspective on this that comes from the AuDHD community. That's people who experience both autism and ADHD. The idea is that for them, embracing authenticity can unlock what's described as a light-speed capacity to discern truth from lies, both out in the world and inside themselves.
This becomes a super powerful tool for finding your way back to well-being.
And this insight leads to a really clear, actionable game plan. First, you tap into that ability to figure out what's true for you and what's not. Second, you start to consciously walk away from anything that feels fake or makes you feel small. Could be a job, a relationship, whatever. And finally, you start choosing what feels aligned and whole and honest, even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else. And we're not just talking about small improvements here. The sources suggest that by doing this, by discerning your truth and ditching what's false, you actually start to create another reality, a reality where your health, your well-being, your true nature, they aren't being compromised anymore. They're being restored.
So it all comes back to that famous advice from Polonius. And maybe the irony is the whole point. Maybe the words can be true, even if the person who said them was a complete hypocrite. And what that does is it leaves the choice and the challenge right in our laps.
Which brings us to this final, really powerful question. It's asking you to look at your own life right now, today, and think, what do you need to remove yourself from, permanently, to start experiencing that other reality? What one thing could you let go of to get back in alignment with your true nature? Because in the end, after all the stories and the science, it really boils down to this one simple, powerful truth. The change can be immediate, and the choice is yours.